Generation X Paranormal.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Hey, we're super excited for this episode. This is going to deal with the history of witchcraft, witches, just kind of everything that encompasses that. And we have this amazing guest, really just, I don't really know how to explain her because she has got such a diverse background in just about everything, especially when it comes to the paranormal.
Yes, well-rounded in the paranormal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just when we'll give you the information, but the absolute diverse background that she goes into ghost hunting, she goes into tea leaf reading. Well, anyway, I mean, I've got so much I can go on for hours about her, but so her name is Rissa Miller, and she is a former senior editor at the Vegetarian Resource Group, former owner photographer at Balance Photography, former photo editor at the Baltimore Sun. That's really impressive. Studied photojournalism at Western Kentucky University and studied playwriting and screenwriting at NYU Tisch School of the Arts. And if you don't know what that is, guys, that's a big time school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that gives us a whole new level on our podcast. So, and Rissa is an editor, author, herbalist, seer, and storyteller. So she's just amazing.
She does it all.
And she does it all. Her storytelling expertise stems from extensive research into the area of esoteric history, and that includes ghost, witchcraft, cryptids, and folklore, and tea leaf reading. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, extremely well-rounded. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, pretty much without further ado, let's explore witchcraft and witch history with Rissa Miller. Hi, Rissa. How are you?
Hi, Logan. I'm doing great. It's nice to see you and Nicole.
Yeah, same here. So, not to be that person, but we've been pretty excited to have you. We've been kind of a buzz about it for the last week. You know, we've seen your web page and things like that. And you have such a vast background, and it's so eclectic, and it's quite frankly, it's really amazing. So. It was really, honestly, be honest with you, it was really hard to kind of nail down what we wanted to talk about because you got so much cool stuff that you can speak from. But you know, to that, if you could, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my full name is Rissa Miller. I live in Maryland and I grew up in Pennsylvania. So I've lived in a lot of different places, but my love of the paranormal has always followed me, despite a real straight-laced career in journalism and editing. So I've worked at a lot of publications. I have been an editor at newspapers, national magazines. I've worked on books. And I have also been a history tour guide. I'm a big fan of history. I love esoteric history. Things like I've been a ghost tour guide. I still am. And
nice.
I am also a third generation tarot reader. I wasn't sure what visuals you might want. So I do have the tarot cards that were my grandmother's and mom's.
Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I have to admit, I don't take them out in public anymore. Once somebody almost spilled a Pepsi on them. But
oh, no.
Yeah, that was not awesome. But
no, I wouldn't be okay with that.
No, but yeah, I do have a wide background. I have studied all kinds of things, from writing and art history and nutrition. Right now I'm studying clinical herbalism. It's always been a great passion of mine. I love plants. And
awesome.
To that, I also do tea leaf reading. Because I love plants, I also do tea leaf reading. But yeah, I do a lot of things, and I have a lot of interests, and I somehow find time and energy to pursue them all.
Well, that's
more power to you, because I don't know that I have a hard time just finding time to do what we do. So, you know, that's fantastic.
What you do is a lot. Yeah, I I recently started a YouTube channel, so I understand how when you have to redo something because of sound or just the time it takes to edit, it's a lot. It's a lot, and the people who do it all the time make it look super easy.
Yeah, that's more him. he's the technical side of it.
Even still, though, it is quite an arduous task to do editing. It really is. But
absolutely. And
Well, that's cool.
So kudos to you for that. It's
Thanks.
It's I would say almost tedious work.
It yes, it can be.
Yeah.
But it is definitely a labor of love. I think for me, a lot of the times, I'm really not a very good follower of our own show because by the time it comes out, I've seen or heard it probably a million times.
Yeah.
So, but so anyway, I think we really wanted to narrow down kind of a history of witches and witchcraft. Quite honestly, because in my opinion, and I'm sure Nicole will probably talk about this too, I think it's one of the more, and this is again my opinion, it's probably one of the more misunderstood and some of the more, I don't know, a lot of people I think of it on the fringe part of things, and I think it kind of gets really misrepresented. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And just
Yes,
so you
please.
both know, I'm a long-winded talker, so feel free to
Please.
cut me off or ask
No.
questions at any time.
We'll
Well,
definitely ask questions.
We'll start it off this way. How did
Yeah.
you become interested in witches, in the subject of witches?
Oh, well, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I mean, I grew up on The Craft and Beetlejuice.
Yes.
And of course, I always loved witches. I used to, I was a horseback rider growing up, and I used to draw pictures of my horse wearing a witch hat. So yeah, I always thought witches were cool. And I had a very unusual childhood in that I was never raised to be afraid of things that were different. I
Sure.
was never raised to be afraid of ghosts. I was not raised to be afraid of witches. And when I got out into the world and realized that other people were afraid of those things, it was kind of surprising to me.
Right.
And so over the years, I swung both ways. I was a journalist, just the facts, and then I've also always loved on the complete opposite side, esoterica, and witchcraft would definitely fall into that category.
Sure.
But, witchcraft plays another big role in the culture of the world, I would say. And that is the role of how women are perceived even to this day. So it is my personal belief, and I know many historians share this feeling, this belief, that the centuries of persecution of witches, mostly women, some men, some animals, some children, but mostly women, I'd say they believe it is roughly 80% or more women, has led to a culture where women aren't to be trusted. We can't trust each other. We can't trust ourselves. And men definitely can't trust us because, women are always up to something. And it's kind of one of those unfortunate parts of the burning times that we still live with. So the burning times is a way that historians refer to the many centuries of witch hunting. And I mean actual witch hunting, not the political term that people use now. The actual witch hunting where women, men, animals, children were burned alive, were beheaded, were imprisoned, were severely abused. Now, were there real witches? Always. There were always real witches. Witchcraft in a general form could be a lot of things. Witchcraft in a general form can be a religion guided by nature. It can be a religion guided by a deity, by multiple deities, by no deities. Witchcraft also encompassed a lot of the healing arts before we had medical doctors. So it was a wide swath that covered the term witchcraft. I mean,
Right.
in the state of Maryland, in the 1400s, if you gave someone a cup of herbal tea and you had a cat companion, those two things alone could condemn you to a
Jeez.
witchcraft trial. That was all it took. That was all it took. Because this culture of fear had been built up by Europeans for so long. Now, the natives did not share that, just to be clear. The natives who were already here when the colonists arrived had a completely different system of beliefs. Witches weren't a thing for them. They had shamans and medicine men and medicine women, and they communed with nature's spirits, and they probably thought we were wackadoodle. But they're probably
Maybe still.
I'm sure that's still the case.
Yeah.
They're probably thinking, like, seriously, what is wrong with these people? But many other native cultures around the world do have a place for shamans, for healers, for medicine men and women, and it's simply not thought of in the same way that the colonists, the Europeans, thought of it. Now, the sad thing is there has been, I'd say in the past few decades, a kick forward, unfortunately, going into a lot of South American and African cultures about fear of witches. And there are places now in South America and Africa where they're putting witches to death, both men and women, out of the archetype created by Europeans. Everything ripples, right? Like you throw that stone in the pond, it's going to keep pushing out. And it is unfortunately still pushing out in both literal and societal ways. And I think it still affects many of us without us even realizing it, in how women see each other, in how women are perceived in society, and in the role we still play. A lot of historians call it the witch wound, the wound that all women carry because of the burning times, because of fear of witches. And, you know, historically looking back, when the Catholic Church decided to go after witches, it was right on the tail end of them lessening. Unfortunately, I sad they did this at all. It was on the tail end of them lessening going after people of the Jewish faith. So the Hammer of Jews was a book that came first, and then they switched it to become the Hammer of Witches. These were basically similar texts written to persecute people who were different. So first they went after people of the Jewish faith, and then they decided to go after witches. Now, witches were a much more difficult to define group.
Sure.
Right.
And it encompassed so many people, you know, and just by associating with a witch, you could be condemned to death. It was a culture of fear that it has come up over and over again in history. I mean, if you look at the panic that was Salem, Massachusetts in 1692, that was a panic. And unfortunately, it has repeated in history. We have had it since then here in America. We called it the Satanic Panic. It happened in the 1970s and 80s. And people were put in jail. People were checked for the mark of Satan. We did the same things. I
remember
sometimes,
that.
like when I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is literally the same. Like we as a society didn't learn. We didn't learn. We didn't learn the first several hundred times. Let's do it again. No,
Well, I remember,
like, let's not.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember just on a surface level, I would go to the record store, which, by the way, that existed in my time, which doesn't anymore. But, you know, you would get the little PMRC label that said explicit lyrics on stuff because they were censoring things. I remember I couldn't buy like an Ozzy Osbourne record because somehow there was satanic, satanic things involved, and, you know, the PMRC had to get involved. Anyway, I can get into a long spiel about that. But no, you're right. I do remember that time very well.
Yeah. You know, when I was growing up, there was a park we used to go to, and then suddenly there was just a rumor. It was never substantiated, because when I got older, I looked it up. Those journalism skills came in handy. But, and they still do, like all the time.
Sure.
I looked it up, and it turned out this park, it was called Rocky Ridge. There was a rumor that a satanic cult had moved in, and that it was like full of all of these Satanists doing, terrible deeds. I mean, if there was ever a satanic cult there, they were never arrested. It was never reported by the paper, and there was no police report ever made. So, P.S., we also live in the United States, and to be a Satanist is perfectly legal and within your rights.
It is, yeah.
So, that was a thing that seems to have been overlooked. But all of that said, it is a fascinating relationship with the word witch that people have.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to another topic. Witch is, I think, is just obviously shortened for the study or the practice of witchcraft. And, and the reason I ask this is my grandmother, my mom's side, I'm Scottish, Swedish, and my father's side, I'm Native. And she was very much so what they would call a curandera in
I know what that is.
Right. And there were so many things that she would do, and I wish to this day that I could have remembered some of it. I mean, there are a few things I do remember. There was this 3-egg thing that she did when we got into a house to cleanse it.
Yep, I know it.
You know that one. Okay. It's so crazy. I don't know any people that know that. That is so awesome.
Did she believe in floating or cracking the egg?
Cracking.
Okay.
I remember her cracking. They'd go into a bowl, And I remember one time one of them came out red. And
Yeah.
I remember that being a big deal, and I don't remember why.
It means there's an ill-intended entity around.
Really? So she saged after that, so
I
that
bet.
probably makes a lot of sense now. That's so wild. Well, that answered a lot of questions, by the way, that I've had for many years.
I'm so glad to help.
But one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up, and I know this is, I mean, obviously I know about the John Proctor thing, but as far as male witchcraft or the study of males being in witchcraft, you know, I know the large, by and large, it's a woman driven, I guess, practice. But would a male still be considered a witch, or is there another terminology, or how does that
Well,
work?
I mean, I could lean into Harry Potter and say there's wizard.
Yeah.
But and there's also warlocks, but you know, I definitely know a lot of men I have encountered in my life, male identifying people that's used the word witch, and
Okay.
that has historically always been true. So I think that if you expand the word witch to include Wiccans and pagans, you're going to rope into that a lot of male identifying people.
Right.
Okay.
It's going to include a lot more than just a traditional female witch with her cat. And also, you know, lots of witches have familiars that aren't cats, too.
Yes.
But all of that said, I don't think that in practice, witches are only women. Not at all. Now,
Right.
historically, women were targeted. And
Yes.
any man associated with them, be it a father, husband, son, brother, would go down too.
Right, and I know the biggest one of the big historical ones was John Proctor. I know that part, at least loosely. I'm probably not, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but I do know that was part of the situation that happened with him.
Well, you know, and also it depends on where you look. So, for example, in Scotland, where your heritage is, we had James. So
Yes.
James was a very misguided individual. Let's go with that. And
Yes.
when Elizabeth died, he took over England as well, and he brought his enthusiasm for killing witches to England. And he went after mostly women. He sure did. And you know, sometimes I wonder, was that a him thing? Because there were practices he had. I don't know if you know what corpse medicine is, but he practiced it. His physicians practice using parts of dead people's bodies to put on him or feed to him to heal him. I can't think of anything that sounds witchier, personally.
No kidding.
Ew.
But
mean-
well, today we
I
know
didn't
that
know
is
that.
today we know that is absolutely not sterile and probably
Right.
not good for you in any way. However, at that time, the scientific method wasn't a thing yet. So,
Right.
I remember
Gosh.
reading that, going like, okay, so if that's not witchcraft,
Yeah, absolutely.
but
I have to
yeah,
look that up. Corpse
I know.
medicine is
corpse
what,
medicine. Yeah,
I don't
you know,
think I've
there's-
ever heard of that.
There was
Wow.
also historically a practice of when somebody was hanged, like a criminal, of going and touching the body. It's called stroking, and stroking was done by people. They would line up at the death of a criminal who was hanged, both in England and in the colonies, to cure themselves of illness or other maladies, because they believed that the wellness was coming off of that body.
Okay.
I mean, imagine to someone taking their child and like rubbing it on
Yeah.
this dead criminal. But yeah, they did.
Can you imagine how that must have looked in that time frame?
Oh, yeah.
Just going up and hey, you know.
But it was the normal thing. So,
Right,
I
it
mean,
was.
whatever the normal thing,
Yeah.
it may, you know, years from now, whatever we did now may look crazy.
I'm
Very
sure
true.
that we have medical practices now that people even 30 years from now will think are barbaric.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
So-
absolutely.
No
That's
kidding.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, as far as like we know, U.S. history is Salem. You know, that's the big
It's
one
not
that
just
most people
Salem,
know.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Every state has their own history. In fact, in Maryland, there was a man named John Calman who was accused of witchcraft. And his crime, according to the Maryland State Records, was bewitching the body of a woman. And, right?
Seducing.
Basically.
Yeah.
And he literally almost lost his life for that crime. He
Jeez.
was literally on the gallows when his pardon arrived, and it wasn't a full pardon. They said, we're either going to hang you today, or you can choose to be a civil servant for the state for the rest of your life. And he chose to be a civil servant and to live.
I mean, that sounds like something pretty reasonable person would suggest. Yeah,
Yeah.
would take. Yeah.
Although, when I've given one of my talks is history of Maryland witches, and there was a woman on the tour once who was in fact an employee of the state of Maryland. She goes, "I would have taken the noose." But I mean, who knows what her job was? I'm not sure what she did for Maryland.
That's funny.
I take the noose. I'm okay.
She's like, I would have chosen differently.
Not to tangent too much, but I know that Baltimore has such an enriched background in not just obviously not just in witchcraft, but even you look at the Edgar Allan Poe situation that happened there.
Yeah.
And I have my personal thoughts. I think that guy was I think he struggled with a lot of this. I think in his time, he didn't know how to react to some of this. So he probably had a lot of difficulties with it, but.
So I used to work at the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Baltimore.
Oh, here we go.
Right.
So you asked the right question. Edgar Allan Poe was a person who he suffered a lot with what we believe now we might call depression, or we might call mental health challenges. But at the time, that wasn't a thing, especially for men. And it wasn't an accepted thing that a man could have mental health challenges in that time. And he did, of course, live through the Victorian time. He was around when there were spiritualists and people with Ouija boards. The Ouija board also, of course, came from Baltimore.
I didn't know that.
Oh, you
I
didn't?
know there.
No.
Oh. So the the Ouija board was invented in Baltimore. It was patented by a lawyer named Elijah Bond. And I wish I had a photo to show you. His grave, which is in Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore, it looks like a Ouija board.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, that is pretty
I'll
neat.
have to look that up.
Yeah. They were made in Baltimore until the 1960s when Parker Brothers bought them and their production moved to Salem, Massachusetts.
Really? And that's something. I did not know that.
Yeah.
See, dinner and a show. We learned something. So awesome.
So yeah, Mr. Poe, Mr. Poe definitely had his own demons and obsessions, and he gave a voice to a lot of darkness that there were other writers that did before. I mean, obviously Shakespeare and has ghosts and witches, and Mary Shelley came before him, Bram Stoker. And he, of course, gave us the short story. Mr. Poe gave us the short story. I mean,
Yes, he did.
Thank you, Mr. Poe.
Yeah.
And it was groundbreaking work that he did at the time, that he could bring the macabre so much to life and in a short form. So his work was significant both in its style and content, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
And he didn't just write in Baltimore. He wrote in lots and lots of places. But, I mean, of course, Baltimore is one of the cities that claims him. He did live there, and that is where Virginia Clem was from as well.
Right.
And they're both buried there. He died there. And I believe she died in New York, I think.
I think that's right.
I don't know.
I know a little. I know enough to be dangerous about Edgar Allan Poe, but I think that's correct.
It's been a minute since I talked about the specific facts of his life. So if I'm wrong, forgive me. I'm pretty sure she died in New York. I know she was very sick in the time they were living in their cottage there. So, and he was also writing letters with another lady at the same time.
Imagine that.
But, when he died in Baltimore, a big part of the mystery was, yes, he had been an alcoholic. We know this. But he was on the wagon. He had not had a drink in a long time, and he was really motivated not to drink because he was going to marry a second time. He had a woman he was very excited about marrying. It was a woman he wanted to marry before he married Virginia, and she had previously turned him down. And she was widowed, and he was a widower, and he was finally going to get with this lady he really wanted to marry. And he wasn't even supposed to be in Baltimore for very long. So it's a long-standing mystery what happened between the time he arrived in Baltimore and the time he died in the hospital. He did not die on the street in Baltimore, by the way, just so you know.
Really?
I know
No.
I remember that
That
being
was
up
like
for,
the big mystery.
Yeah.
No. He was
Okay.
found on the street, and he was hospitalized for several days before he died in the hospital. If you go to
Right.
Baltimore, the building that used to be that hospital does have a marker. This is the death place of Edgar Allan Poe. It's now an apartment building, which is a little weird. But yeah, it used to be a hospital. A lot of people died there in the 1800s. Now you can move in and have a luxury apartment. But yeah,
I'm good.
Yeah.
yeah, hard pass, right?
Hard pass. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
But yeah, there are a lot of places that claim he died there, but it was actually at the hospital. There are like spots all over the city. Oh, he died here. Like, no, he didn't. We know where he died. He died in the hospital.
It's kind of like in Illinois, there's always a place where Lincoln last slept or whatever.
Or also all over the East Coast. George Washington slept here.
Yeah.
I swear that man got around. He slept everywhere.
All right. Well,
Big claim to
I'm
fame.
going to bring it back down. I went into tangent land. I couldn't help myself because I do love the Edgar Allan Poe connection. That's pretty awesome.
I do too, and honestly, I could talk to you about it for a whole hour. Like I love Edgar Allan Poe as well.
Well, maybe we'll have to bring you back on.
Yeah.
We'll just have an episode on Edgar Allan Poe.
I mean, it sounds like there's so much yet to really uncover.
Yeah, I didn't know there was that much.
Yeah.
So as far as European witch history, the only really I think I know about it is like the Scottish and Irish and English. Now that's
it started
mostly
in
my
Germany.
bloodline.
Yeah,
Okay.
it started in Germany.
Yeah.
So
Germany,
the killing of witches started in Germany, and it was followed quickly by many of the other countries, going south mostly, and then Spain and Italy started the killing of cats. So that became really significant piece of witch history because you know what came over on the Silk Road, right? The plague.
Do you?
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The witch craze got all this excitement around killing cats. Literally thousands of cats lost their lives during the burning times. And when all of those boats with the rats infected with bubonic plague landed, there were no natural predators to take care of them because people had killed all the cats.
Oh.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Once again, you would think we would learn our lesson, but no.
Right.
No.
No, we don't do that here.
No.
So what was the reasoning behind the cats? How did they look at the cats and think that they were witches?
Well, cats were very independent. I mean, they still are, right? A cat is a
Yes.
sassy,
Oh, yeah.
independent creature. And the Catholic Church put out an edict that cats were associated with the devil, and you could tell by their demeanor and personality. The fact that they were not
Gosh.
obedient, they were not good work animals. What they overlooked was the fact that cats are a crucial part of our ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely.
Like a super important piece of the puzzle to have cats around. Yeah. It's one of those things that they just didn't understand yet scientifically, right? And
I wonder
so
if
they-
that has
ahead.
much to do with, I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off, but, with like, granted, it's Hollywood eyes, but even like Egyptian, aren't they somewhat
Bass.
the same with cats?
No, they worshipped cats.
They
Cats-
worship cats. Okay.
Cass,
Okay.
Bastet was a goddess. She was worshipped by Egyptians, and
Okay.
cats were revered there because
Okay.
Egyptians kind of understood that cats were important.
Yeah,
I guess they just had more powerful skills of observation, perhaps.
I would say so.
I mean, I'm speculating. I'm fully speculating on that, but that's my guess. Yeah. So no, other places in the world, they did not do what the Europeans did with the cats, and the Europeans paid the price. We did just come through a pandemic, so everybody has some idea, but the bubonic plague was worse.
Yeah.
More people died and died horribly. There was no medicine. Their best medicine was like aromatherapy,
Yeah.
And leeches and everything else that they probably try to put on these poor people.
Leeches. There was a product called, sorry, I'm going to get a drink.
Yeah, please. By all means. Yeah, we,
I just feel like the basic ongoing theme here is you color outside the lines even a little bit, you're a witch.
yeah.
Whether you're an animal or anything else.
Yeah. If you don't
You
fit
don't
the,
strictly follow the
Right.
guidelines.
yeah, if you don't follow
Absolutely.
the rubber stamp of what everybody
But
should be.
it wasn't just that. During the witch craze, it was real easy to get rid of someone you didn't like.
Yes.
So Nicole,
That's kind of what happened in Salem, right?
Yes.
I mean, basically.
that's how it started. And then it just kind of spiraled out of control. So, say I'm a widow and a gentleman comes along and proposes to me, mostly because he wants to get my farm. And I say, no, I'm good. Me and my satanic cats are going to stay. And he could just go and claim I'm a witch. Literally,
Wow.
the proof could come out of thin air. It could be something as simple as I have a mark on my arm. And actually, the camera's not picking it up, but I have a scar right there. So if you
Mm-hmm.
have a mark anywhere on your body, it could be the mark of the witch or the mark of the devil. If you do any kind of healing work, you're definitely a target. And then there were legitimate healers, midwives, herbalists that died because, they couldn't cure somebody.
Right.
And this happens. There's no even with all the advances we have in science today, people still get sick and die. It's just
Oh,
part
sure.
of
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
part of the world. And obviously that happened with childbirth, with illness, with, the things they didn't understand yet, like influenza. It happened. And if somebody's child died, the parents could be like, "Oh, Nicole, you're a witch. You killed my kid." And that was all the proof they would need to have you and your whole family and maybe your neighbors also hanged. That was it. That was all that needed
So
to happen.
scary.
So it created this sort of closed culture where people didn't trust each other at all,
Yeah.
especially didn't trust women. And
Right.
yet, like, they needed their healers,
Mm-hmm.
and you needed your community. And especially back then, you needed your community. There was no grocery store. You kind of had to work together.
Uh-huh.
And it created these divisions and this foggy atmosphere throughout Europe where people didn't trust strangers, they didn't trust each other, they certainly didn't trust their neighbors. So it was very frightening, I'm sure, especially to be a woman back then.
Which I find so counterintuitive because I think human and humanity, we're community based.
We are.
That we live on community. It's we share in things, experience, resources. To all of a sudden turn on a dime and now not trust anybody within your community, it now becomes almost really disingenuous to the human experience because then you're not really practicing as a human at that point. That's probably why a lot of people go a little outside the box and where they should be. So,
Well, and you're less likely to help someone if
Right.
you know you're going to be accused of being
Yeah.
a witch, even if you could have prevented a death or anything. No, I'm not going to even try
right.
because if something goes
Exactly.
wong. Yeah.
There was a similar thing that happened in recent years where somebody was first aid certified and they saw someone who was hurt, but they didn't stop to help because they had just heard a story on the news about somebody stopping to help and getting sued for not doing it right.
I think I heard about this.
And so they
Yes.
were like, "Nope, I'm not even going to help. Not going to help." And I thought to myself, "Wow, we still haven't learned. We're still doing the same things. This doesn't make any
Absolutely.
sense."
No, we really haven't, and it's so unfortunate because I think we could. Well, I mean, obviously, all the things you can say about being able to prosper as a people, but yeah, no, you hit it right on the head with that for sure.
I know it's a cliche, but teamwork makes the dream work is a
Yeah.
cliche for a reason.
Right. I mean,
You know,
cliches are
yeah.
built out of some sort of some sort
They
of truth.
usually are,
you know?
yeah. They
Yeah.
usually are. And it's really unfortunate that history turned on women and all kinds of people who were just a little different. Just
Yeah.
because you didn't follow the same faith doesn't mean that you were wrong. It just means that you were different. So it created
Right.
this culture of other. And we're still, as a
Still doing
society,
that.
we're still doing this thing with other, and not just with witches, but with anybody who's other. And it's extremely unfortunate, and I think that the burning times and the witch hunts really solidified that into the collective consciousness.
Mhm. Yeah.
Maybe because granted, I'm nowhere near a subject matter expert. That's why you're schooling me right and left here. But you keep bringing up the burning times, and I don't know that I'm familiar with that. Can you give me a little bit of quick background on that? Because I'm not sure I understand that.
It's a general phrase that historians use to describe the centuries of time, starting around the 1300s, going through the mid 1700s, when women were burned as witches, mostly
Okay.
women.
I had assumed that. I wanted to make sure because I was like, I've heard that a couple of times now, and I didn't know if I was 100%.
I just didn't know exactly the time period.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a
13.
lot we don't know about then. There's a lot of villages with no recorded history all over Europe. I mean, not everybody knew how to write,
Right. Yeah.
and not every village even had somebody who was writing their history. So we know it started in the 1300s in Germany, We don't know exactly where or how. We know some of the first people who were burned, but we don't know exactly what went wrong. And it's spread by word of mouth, which is how things still spread today. We have fancier gadgets to do it, but we still do it the same way. Same way. And it went like wildfire across Europe because, you know, when you have problems to blame, why not blame the other? Why not blame someone else for your lot, for your hard luck, for your crops dying, for the fact that your horse has colic, whatever it is, you know? And we still do it. We still do it as a species.
It's so much easier to do that than accept the loss for yourself or the blame on yourself.
Yeah, or just the responsibility.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around.
That's interesting to me that it started in Germany, because I guess I always assumed it was maybe like a practice by the Druids or something like that came down to the pagans, and because that's the only thing I've actually really heard about is from like Scotland, Ireland, England area, and so I'm like, well, that's clearly where it came from. I guess I never thought to look actually the real history. So the
pagans
that's
had
really
a
interesting.
stronghold. They did not want to give up to the Christians and Catholics at all.
No.
No. And there were places where pagans and druids and multi-deity faiths held on for a long time. And it took quite a while for this to infiltrate some of those areas, or just one crazy leader like James to bring it along, and everybody's like, okay, we're going to do what you say because we don't want to die.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think the induction of fear in the leadership can get you a lot of places.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
Well,
That'll do it.
yeah, a lot of them got killed for every other reason too.
Yeah, they did.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I guess what is a witch today?
Yeah.
Like what does that mean today?
It can mean so many different things, honestly. There are still practicing, there are all kinds of practicing pagans. There are still practicing druids. There are practicing Wiccans. Wiccan is a newer faith. It started around the 1950s. There are solitary witches of all different kinds, and not all witches work with deities. Some do. Some work with. I actually have only met, I think, in my whole life, 2 people who recognize Satan as their deity, and all the rest of the witches, pagans, etc. that I've ever met have a whole different pantheon of deities that they talk to. It is a huge umbrella term, witch,
Right.
and it covers so many different faiths and beliefs that it's very difficult to put it all together. Some people who are practicing witches work strictly with nature. Like, and that's it. Moon cycles, plant cycles, trees, and that's the basis of their faith. So it's some work directly with spirits, like ancestor spirits, or spirit energies around them. There's just so many variations on the term witch. And
Right.
It's not as easy to define as the other mainline religions. And it is my understanding, and I know that both USA Today and the New York Times have reported on this, that witchcraft, witchiness, witch practice is gone up dramatically, especially in generations younger than mine. And that a lot of people have grown up in a faith that, especially actually in the past few years, through the pandemic and the time after, they feel like their faith didn't really have much to offer. It didn't comfort them. It didn't bring them anything. It didn't bring them any sense of control in the chaos. And a lot of people then turned to some other witchy or pagan type practice that they connected with more, and it just resonated more deeply. And, I get that. If you're going to put the time and energy into a faith practice, you want to feel good about it. You
Sure.
want to feel like it's supporting you in the way that you spiritually want to be supported. So I would say that at some point we'll have to recognize witchcraft as a general mainline religion in this country. It's going to have to happen, probably, hopefully, within our lifetimes.
Right.
That's a really interesting point that I guess I never really put together, that almost like that disenfranchising of what most people would consider, religions that, that we know, a little more mainstream today. Obviously, especially what we've been through within the last, 3 years, whatever have you, that a disenfranchisement like that would cause some people maybe to look for other, I guess, other areas for not just mental satisfaction, but also a spiritual connection with something. And I know this is gonna sound funny, and I'm gonna bring it up because I know you probably don't want me to, but I'm going to anyway.
What?
So this last weekend we went to a Stevie Nicks concert, right?
Yes.
Oh, I love Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Amazing.
How amazing you got to see her live. Yay.
It was
awesome.
incredibly hot, but yes, we had such a good time.
Yeah, if it wouldn't have been her, I don't know that I could have gotten through it because it was like 100 and
It was
when we got there like 105.
104, 105, something like that. Yeah, it was bad.
It was in a big stadium, outside football stadium, and it was just miserable. But it was like
Billy Joel, so you're gonna hang out for that. It's just gonna happen.
Yeah.
That's a once in a lifetime thing. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, we were going one way or another. But the reason I bring it up is when you said that, it kind of resonated with me because there was a lot of younger people there that
I was surprised.
Really surprised us, and they were very much so there for Stevie, not for Billy Joel.
Because most of them left after she played.
Yeah.
Like I had went up to get something like in intermission, and I heard them talking to each other. They were getting a drink or something, and they're like, "We're leaving."
Yeah.
Like we were just here to see Stevie, and I was like, "Well, yeah, that was my main reason as well. I love Billy Joel, but but I'm not going to stay to see Billy Joel."
Yeah.
But yeah, I was surprised, and they were young, like 20s at least.
Yeah, and
like 20, 25,
Yeah, they were
something
very
like
young.
that. And I was a little surprised to see that, to be honest.
And I think the reason I bring that up is because, obviously she's very much so known as being the White Witch and things like that. And whether or not she practices or not, I don't know. But she
None of
has
us
at
do,
least,
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
She at least
you know
has
what?
that.
That's her business. That's her
That's
business.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. But it's just interesting because I wonder if that's part of that new resurgence of it. So it was just interesting that you brought that up.
There's also something about Stevie Nicks, right? Nobody sounds like her. Nobody moves like
no.
her. She's truly an icon in her own time. And I think, it was interesting. It was during 2020. I remember reading an article. Can you tell I read a lot?
No, sure.
That her, some of her music went back onto the top 20 chart in sales.
Yep.
After all those
Doesn't
years.
surprise me.
Yeah,
not one
and some
bit.
of the Fleetwood Mac music as well. Back onto
Yeah.
the top 20 chart because people were sitting at home and they were like, oh, this music is new to me.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's not new to me. I grew up with it.
No, yeah,
but,
same here.
she's still in my rotation. There's never been a point in my life when I didn't have some music by Stevie Nicks somewhere nearby. Whether it was on a cassette tape or a CD or now,
8-track.
Yeah.
Reel to reel.
But yeah, she was also in American Horror Story, so a lot of people found her that way.
That's the way I
great
think.
season.
Now, see, I found her from Practical Magic. I don't know if you remember that movie with Sandra Bullock.
I do.
It was the first time, I'd ever watched anything that wasn't like a typical Halloween witch. You know what I mean? Like it gave like another presentation. I just loved that movie.
Yeah, she
and
was
of
an
course her
everyday
music.
witch. Yeah.
Is through all that, and that's when I discovered her. And so I love those specific songs that are in that movie. But yeah, I think that's probably some of these old 90s movies and stuff are these kids are watching them
Yeah,
and they're probably discovering her. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So-
and also it's so interesting to me when you look at what's popular. When you look at Netflix most popular streaming shows ever were Stranger Things, The Witcher, and Wednesday. They are all dark. They all have horror elements. They all have magic elements. And this is the most popular shows Netflix has put out, at least in the United States, right? I mean, Ghost Hunters is on season, 500?
Oh, I know.
Like it, yeah.
I think it's actually like 26 or 27, something like that. But still, it's
It
like,
feels like it, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've been
it's-
around for a long time.
Since we got married, it's been 17 years ago now.
so it's obviously there's an empty space in the public mind that people are still looking for these same answers.
Oh yeah.
And obviously they haven't found them yet. They're still watching Ghost Hunters. These guys have never found a ghost for 26 years.
No.
We're still looking, right? And we're still watching the Addams Family. We're
Yeah.
still they just remade the Munsters. That we're still
I
watching
know.
these same things. We're still looking for the same answers, and that empty place in our spirit where we don't quite connect is still there.
Yeah, I think that
I
also
agree.
has a lot to do with all that for sure. And then there's like the other element of escapism, you know, that
Yeah.
that just get somewhere else in another headspace so that, you know, obviously, you know, life is life. Things happen and you know, a lot of things can bring you up, bring you down, but you look for that little escapism for that whatever 30-minute, 20-minute, 1 hour and 20-minute window to tell you that, hey, I can kind of unplug for a little while.
Right.
But what's interesting about those kind of shows is not only do you get that, but the element that we just talked about where, you know, the macabre and certain things that you won't necessarily talk to, you know, obviously we do because we've got a show on it, but that you don't really speak to the masses or other people about, you know, paranormal, because it's still, I think a lot has come full circle and it's a little bit more accepted, but I also think there's a lot that is kind of still in the fray and the fringes. Right. Exactly. And, yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot, to me, that has a lot to do with what's going on with sort of that resurgence is I think that people are starting not only to be able to talk about certain things, but also to be able to accept certain things. And that just could just be me, but you know, but that's kind of what I feel about that.
And I also think, especially with the pandemic, like I was raised non-denominational Christian, but I never really felt as connected in a building as when going outside. And like we love nature. We go out, we hike, you know, and that's where I feel the closest to God or, you know, whatever you want to call it.
Spirit, source, the universe.
Spirit,
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, because everybody was locked down for so long, the only place they could go was outside and they could go do these things that they normally don't get to do. And maybe they felt a different
Maybe.
connection to the earth or whatever. And so they're, you know,
I
exploring
hope so,
that.
because we need that
Yeah.
real bad.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, you see all
They're
these,
real
you know,
bad.
We need it really, really bad.
you see all these kind of upticks in like grounding things and getting back into nature and just that whole practice. And we could probably have a whole show about grounding, but
We could. We should.
you know, just we should.
People
yeah,
need
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
They do. We got a grounding blanket or grounding sheet just recently. So
But we walk outside barefoot when we can. And,
Yeah.
you know, all these things that we've forgotten as a human race.
I've got
the way we're
my
supposed
big,
to be.
beautiful grounding crystal right
ah,
here.
cool,
Nice.
awesome. That's so awesome. So with kind of bringing it back a little bit,
Oh,
we
can I
talked.
make one more? Can I say one more
please.
thing? Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm also a ghost tour guide, and I've been doing that
Yeah.
for years. And I want to tell you how many people come on those tours looking for someone to talk to.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, the history is interesting and the storytelling is interesting, but then they're waiting for me to, you know, stop the tour so they can come up and say, I don't have anyone to talk to about this, but I had a ghost experience, or my house is haunted, or what do you think about this? It happens all the time. There's a huge need for being able to speak about it. And they're like, oh, I tried to tell my family, or I tried to tell my colleagues, or I tried to tell my spouse, and they didn't believe me, or they told me I was crazy, or,
Yeah.
you know, or they threw some religious dogma at me that it was the devil and I had to, you know,
Right.
stop thinking about it. And yet they're still being haunted, or they're still having some kind of psychic experience that they don't know what to do with, and they don't have language for, and they don't know how to put it together and have it make sense in their mind. And I wish that within the framework of all of this fear of witchcraft and fear of other, and that we could make space for people's experiences in a safe and comfortable way. It just doesn't make sense to me that they have to go find a stranger to
Right.
who's telling them history stories to
Yep.
have someone to talk to. I always make time for it. I always listen. I always try to
Sure.
offer whatever support I can that they need. And there have been some that needed a lot more support than I could offer. But
Yeah.
Right.
that said, it, you know, I mean, I've had people that are convinced they have possessions going on in their homes, and I'm like, you need to find a medium
Yes.
who can figure out what's going on for you. You need someone who's experienced. And of course, I keep a list, but it's like these things that I learned over the years doing this work. Like, there is a demand for a safe place to tell stories. So P.S. Thanks for doing what you're doing, because you're creating that.
Yeah, of course.
you.
Yeah, and that's honest.
Easy to us because I mean, even dating and stuff, we even watch ghost stuff together.
Yeah, actually, the first movies it was a little
that you bought me,
a
the
little-
Unsolved Mysteries.
Mysteries Ghost.
Ghost
That was the first thing I ever
something.
bought her, by the way.
I love it.
But no, we definitely and I think at the end of the show we usually put in, you always have your outro stuff, but we always want to invite people to email us. We are 100% open to anybody coming on the show and saying, "Hey, this is what I got going on. Let's talk." We want to foster that because we also believe that there are a lot of people that experience things that you're right, they have nowhere to turn, and even just talking to somebody about it makes them feel even just that much more comfortable. Please, by all means. Yeah, this is exactly why we started getting into this.
And we were both raised in families where we could. Like I grew up in haunted houses, and my whole family we had to talk about it. There was no, this is happening.
That's my
no
story
matter what.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my family, like specifically my uncle, I'll shout out to my Uncle Jim right now. We talk about it every single week.
Yeah.
I mean, we just, we go on ghost tour things with him all the time. And so it's something that's always been an open thing. But, for people that can't do that or they're looked down on in their own family, that's got to be something very hard to not be able,
I was honestly
because that's scary.
surprised. Yeah, I was surprised that people had no one to talk to.
Yeah, and I think that for a lot of people, it's also, it lifts the veil enough to where it probably has them questioning a lot of things that they've had or held as values for a very long period of time, if not lifelong. So I'm sure there's a lot of wrestling with the demons, as they say. But by all means, if anybody wants to reach out to us, please, info@gxparanormal.com. Shameless plug, but kind of getting to where I know there's a lot of recent stuff coming up, and it's to me it's amazing that there's a resurgence. And do you find that with that resurgence, there's a little bit more? And I know it probably has a lot more. There needs to be a lot more to it, but has it become more acceptable? Is it turned into? I guess fear is always going to be there. People are always going to be afraid of what they don't know. And there's always going to be that tangible, if it's fear, then I don't want it, or I'm going to kill it, or I'm going to stamp it out or whatever, and which is horrible to me. But, is there at least more acceptance to the practice of witchcraft and people identifying, as being whatever, a witch or however they want to, or however they feel they believe?
I think there's been a lot of education that has happened in the past few years. This is maybe a positive of social media, where we have learned that not everybody thinks like us, and that's okay. And I see it all the time on my feed that there are people who are suddenly into crystals. And maybe before they thought crystals were part of Satan, but now they're kind of like, I'm okay with this, and it's like these small little steps towards accepting something that was quite different or uncomfortable to them previously. And, obviously things have to happen in steps.
Sure.
Right.
That's just the way that humanity's mind works. And that's just the way we're made. Change happens gradually. And I think that all of these steps forward are positive. The generations younger than ours, those folks that you saw as Stevie Nicks, they have such a wonderful general culture among them. They're very accepting. They're very forthright. They literally won't put up with people's crap the way we had to at their age.
Yeah.
And, we would have never started the Me Too movement. Our generation wouldn't have done it. We wouldn't have, because we should have. Our parents should have. Our mothers should have. But that just wasn't the way things were. And I am excited to see where they go with all aspects of culture, with faith, with societal norms, with acceptance, with body image, with so many things. Because they're way ahead of where we were.
They are, for sure. Yeah, we even to the point I think of myself as a very open-minded person, but I'm very middle of the road in a lot of different things. but I always used to think
Because
I'm pretty
you're Gen X,
open-minded.
that's how we are.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm pretty middle of the road. That's just me. And
That defines us.
pretty much, yeah. I mean, there was a great song, "Middle of the Road," right? But you know, even then, when I see it, their level of acceptance, even I'm just taken aback a little bit by how progressive and how they almost just go into without any fear. And it's just, for me, it's just like, wow, I hear it, and congratulations, but man, that must have taken some guts, because some of the things they do fearlessly is just, it's pretty amazing.
Well, we were also taught to fear things that they weren't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Psychologists will tell you that you're only born truly fearing two things: loud noises and falling. Everything else is learned. So,
That's interesting.
It's interesting, right? Everything else is learned. So all of our fear of rejection and our mostly fear of rejection, all of our fear of shame, we were taught that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you, and this is just something I saw. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but do you know why they associate pointy hats with witches?
I do.
You do? Okay, let's hear it.
And it's nothing to do with witchcraft. It's part of beer history, actually.
Yes, that's what I found.
So when beer first became a thing, it was mostly made by women. It's a fermented beverage product, right? And women who fermented this beverage used to take it to market, but they wanted visibility. This is in the time before, neon signs or, somebody shouting or whatever. So they wore these big pointy hats to bring attention to themselves in the marketplace. That is the beginning of the pointy hats. I'm not 100% sure how it transitioned into the Halloween thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, most women's hats didn't look like that historically for any reason ever. Those were literally just worn for the market. They wouldn't have been practical for any other reason. They wouldn't keep your hair back. They really wouldn't function. And most hats were functional. I think a lot of the smaller hats that you see the women wear, like in Harry Potter and stuff, were probably more realistic, historically speaking. But or bonnets even, That's probably what witches wore, because that's what, you needed to keep your hair back to do your craft. But, or just to do your regular everyday work. But I know where the brooms came from. They were put into the witch, you didn't ask this, but they were put into the witch repertoire by a French painter. And they were supposed to be a symbol of sexual liberation. Of a naked woman flying through the night with her black cat on her broom, and there's this big stick between her legs. So it was part of the fear of witches, was the sexually liberated woman, and his painting depicted that, and it just became part of the lore.
Wow. No, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I didn't know about the broom. I just found the thing about the hat, and that they brought it to market, and they said that they would stir it in like a cauldron, and they usually had the black cat, or not necessarily black, but the cats to keep the mice away.
Yeah, they had a cat.
Yeah, and that's where it came to be known as witches. And I guess the men didn't like the competition that were there, and so they'd point the finger like, "Oh, that's a witch," to keep people from going to buy their beer.
That logic checks out.
So I just wanted to see if that's what.
Yeah, it's
really
all about
was,
the patriarchy at the end.
Yeah.
No
I won't
offense.
confirm or deny I know about that genetic code. It plagues us all.
It's just crazy. I always love to know where this stuff came from, because it came from. It usually comes from something like that.
Yeah, it's something bizarre that's literally not what you think it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
So did you want?
I kind of stalked you a little bit on
That's
the
totally
internet.
fine.
But you had so much stuff. But I'm interested about this Women of the Wild Gather thing that you're doing. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So it's my first year presenting with them. I'm very excited. It is a program it's a whole weekend retreat for women and female identifying people. And it's presented by a group out of Washington, D.C. And this year it's going to be at a camp in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. It's very rustic. And part of the idea of it is being in touch with nature. that the whole weekend, it's not just workshops and people talking at you, but you're sort of co-creating the entire experience with nature as you go. You know, like they already sent out a mailer about the Susquehannock people who had lived there centuries ago before there were colonists, so that everybody attending would have a better understanding of the land's history and the land's first cultures. And I'm presenting a workshop about learning to retrust your intuition, which is a thing that most women don't trust at all, because we're told, oh, that hunch you have, that's crazy. You're being crazy. Why are you so crazy? You're emotional. So honestly, intuition is real. Even science acknowledges that it's real. And I mean, some people are more intuitive than others, but it is my firm belief that intuition is like any other muscle. You can make it stronger if you use it. So I'm really excited to talk about that. It's a weekend to connect with the other participants and the various workshop instructors, and to sort of allow yourself the space to heal and be with nature.
That's amazing.
When is that? When is that?
It's in the beginning of October. So in Pennsylvania around that time, the weather should be gorgeous. There should be leaves changing. It should really be just a perfect scenario for the weekend.
That's awesome.
That sounds like a really good time. Yeah. It's right up your alley.
It is. That's why I saw it and I was like, what is this? We weren't so busy. I'd be going.
Maybe I have to do it next year.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Is this a yearly thing that
they do it every
happens?
year? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
So this is kind of where we let you.
Okay.
I mean, do you have anything coming out, or what? What do you got going on? Yeah, what's going on? Talk to us.
So I do a lot of presenting. I honestly love talking to groups of people, and I know nobody likes that, but I do. I love it.
I know, sure.
So this weekend on Sunday, I'm doing a workshop on flower essences, which are vibrational medicine made from flowers. The following weekend, I'll be in Philadelphia at the Pagan Pride Festival, talking about tea leaf reading, which is one of my great passions. I brought some of my drawings along to show you. These are from tea leaf readings that I've done.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when I turn a cup, when my client turns the cup, rather, I draw what's in it. So everybody walks away with their own pen and ink drawing.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Cool.
Isn't that fun? Yeah. So then I'll be in New York after that, but that's a private event. I was hired to talk about cryptids, which I love.
Oh,
and so
that's cool.
I'll be in New York doing a private event with some cryptids, maybe. But
never know.
I mean, if I'm lucky, I guess. And then, I have all kinds of stuff upcoming. I'm doing the Albert Witch Festival in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's a huge cryptid festival, and I'll be talking about the history of witches.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah. I'll be at a museum in Pennsylvania later in October. I'm doing another cryptid history talk, but that will be specifically the cryptids of PA. So, yeah, I've got lots of fun stuff coming up. And if anybody listening ever wants a reading, I do most of my readings remotely because I'm all over the place, right? So I don't have a home base. Yeah. My home base is Zoom. So I do most of my readings remotely, and I do tea leaf reading, I do smoke scrying, and I do tarot.
That's so awesome.
So what is the smoke scrying? Is that what you said? What is that?
It is gazing into smoke and looking for symbols, just like gazing into a teacup and looking for symbols.
Oh, okay.
In high school, I just called that Friday.
Well,
lame dad joke over here.
It's not the same. I promise you, it's not the same.
No, I know. I make light, but no, that sounds really cool. I mean, I know that, and I don't know if it's somewhat connected, but even when you're like at a campfire or something, and you kind of get into that headspace when you're looking at the smoke and everything. So I can definitely.
Pyromancy has a lot of flavors. Capnomancy is only one of them. Excuse me, but within the family of pyromancy, you can read smoke, you can read flames, you can read embers, you can throw things in and listen to the sound. There's a lot within the pyromancy family.
See, that's interesting because I do that just
intuitively.
Yeah. Well, most native cultures all had fires.
They did.
That's true.
So they'd spend time around fires with each other. So
it's one of the most ancient forms of divination out there.
I'm very, and it's weird because I do
very
that.
green when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that we don't know. So thank you for sharing all
For
of
sure.
this.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we could probably talk for 8, 10, 12 hours, and I know you got other things to do. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, thank you very much.
You know, we'd love to have you back if you're ever open to it. When we were trying to narrow down what we wanted to talk to you about, or
One subject.
I said, there's no way, because there's so much cool stuff that she can talk about. So
We did pretty well staying on track. We sideways. We went a little sideways here and there, but overall, we did pretty well.
which
I'm happy.
I'm proud of us because I could
Yeah, we could have gone way off.
and I am as guilty of it when I'm editing, going, oh, I probably shouldn't have gone that far. But anyway, thank you so much, and we'll definitely reach back out, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
I would love that. Thank you, Nicole and Logan, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm pretty blown away.
I am too.
I mean, we kind of knew, we teed it up because we knew she'd be amazing, but I had no idea.
I didn't either. I mean, my knowledge doesn't go very far when it comes to witches beyond what we, think we know.
Right.
But I guess the most surprising fact is that it didn't start in the British Isles like Ireland, Scotland, England, as I assumed.
Right.
But Germany.
Well, I mean, how could we, I think that.
Well, it's because, I do a lot of research on that because, DNA wise, says I'm more from those areas, like Norway, Sweden, all up in there. So I was like, I look into the Vikings, I look into all of that, and and I've always been fascinated by the Druids and how they worshipped, and I just assumed because it's very they worship nature and they did all this stuff that that's what turned into witches.
Yeah, and
that's what came to the United States. And led to Salem because a lot of the people in Salem were Irish or they were Scottish or, so I don't know, or English.
Well, and then, I hate to be the person to kind of bring that up, but, you look at all the movies and TV and the stuff that we get spoon fed,
Well, there was a lot of persecution in Scotland and Ireland for witches. I mean, and that was up till, I don't know the exact date, but it was.
Oh, yeah.
Way later than it should have been.
Sure.
So that's why I just think, I was like, oh, okay, that's the history. So she definitely schooled me on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Which I'm glad. I'm very happy to be schooled.
Yeah,
I mean, but that's just what I assumed.
I think just the way she can kind of just draw back on stuff that, first of all, she must have so much knowledge is just about to pour out of her head. But, when it comes to like the different types of people practicing, because, I mean, listen, I don't mean it to sound the way it's going to sound, but, I just always assume witchcraft is witchcraft and people practice it or they don't practice it. And I guess it's my naivete that I didn't realize that, and I guess I probably should have, that there are many different types of people that believe different things, whether it's multiple deity, one deity, no deity. I had no idea about that.
I didn't either. And, now that we spoke about it, it seems to me like it's almost like a religion. I mean, you got, all your different denominations and stuff like that. So I would think of it as like, maybe there's like the base and then there's the branches that come off of it. Like one, they believe this, but maybe didn't want to follow that. So they broke off in this. We do this or, and she mentioned the different deities and, but we've been taught at least, growing up that it all has to do with Satan. And, if you avert from Christianity at all, it just automatically means that.
Right.
And that's why I kind of wanted to get into this because I knew that it couldn't be just that.
Right.
Because most of these people that you meet that call themselves Wiccan or whatever it may be are usually very peaceful people. They're usually nature lovers. They get along with everyone. They respect each other. That to me is not Satan.
No.
In any way, shape, or form. And like she said, she only knew 2 people that actually identified themselves, with Satan.
Right.
So it's very, I don't know. It just resembles to me a lot of like Native American
Mm-hmm.
belief systems. A lot of like Islander, like, you know, if you think about Hawaii or, you know, the New Zealanders, you know, and they're all a type of native, whether
Sure.
people know that or not.
It's tribal.
I mean, yeah, they're tribal people. Even the African, you know, it's the same type, like celebrating and in a way worshiping nature and where we live and what's around us.
right.
And so that's what I think that they're, you know, a lot of them are probably doing,
Sure. Yeah.
you know. And then if they're, you know, casting spells or whatever, are they just, that's something I probably should have asked her, like, what does that mean to cast a spell? But we could have gone on and on and on.
Oh yeah. I
Speaking
mean,
with her. But it seems more, you know, ritualistic, like with fires and you know, plants and that type of stuff. So
nature
that,
bound.
yes,
type, yeah.
yes. Like, you know, the natives, well, you should probably speak about this, but like, you know, when they sit in the circle and they, is it the peyote that they smoke?
Well, I mean, and it's not just one particular nation that does that. I mean, it varies from nation to nation, but yes, there is usually some sort of storytelling involved, and typically that has to do with kind of the belief system, and rarely ever is it in a building. It's usually outside.
With
and
nature.
with nature, right? And I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that maybe they just didn't really have that kind of facilities, or if it's just being in touch with, you know, that particular deity or that particular belief that everything's pretty well grounded in nature. And that is definitely the belief system that a lot of native cultures have. Not all, but a good majority of them have.
Yeah. Well, like I told her, I've always felt more spiritual in nature than I've ever felt inside of a building. So I would assume that's probably why.
Well, there is and I don't know it off the top of my head, the actual name for it, but there is a well-known study that I think they took some kind of device and put it on people's heads, and there is a different wave pattern that your brain emits from when you're walking down the street of, say, like New York City, and walking in a forest down a path. Your brain just completely has a different signal, has a different way of interpreting. So no matter what, that is a measurable thing that we have, that we know that people do act differently. People think differently. They are just different human beings in nature.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not just walking. It's, you know, they've got studies about wading in water and, you know, gardening, even like spending time in the soil. That's why gardeners are usually very happy.
Yeah.
Because there's some, like, is it microbiome? Is that the
I
word?
think so.
I'm sorry if I've got it wrong, but it's close to that in the soil, and it's actually an antidepressant. So they recommend for people that are depressed to go outside. That's the number one thing they always say: go outside, spend time in nature, walk in nature. And it really, you know, it basically, it's like taking an antidepressant, except no after effects, except happiness.
Right. I think we could all have that. So
that makes sense. It totally makes sense to me.
yeah. Well, folks, you know, that's one of those things where, you know, we had a great show. I think there was so much information that came out during that. You know, I think that that's exactly, you know, Rissa put so much information out there that you can digest in any way that you want to. And of course, you know, not everything needs to be believed, but it's just a different aspect of how people, you know, connect with Earth. So.
And if you want to get in touch with her for a tea leaf reading, I do have a website where you can go on and sign up for one. And it's www.tea-smoke.com/tea-leaf-readings.
Yep.
So you can contact her that way.
We'll also put it in the show notes, and on YouTube we'll put it on the links in the description. So that way That way you can get there from there too. But
I've never had one done. I'm
no,
curious.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do one, or I at least want you to do one because that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how they have to be trained in it. I know
Yeah.
there's certain, just like palm reading, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've never had any of that done.
I haven't either. I don't think there was a lot. Yeah. I don't think there was a lot of that going on in the military. Hey, you guys gonna go for palm reading? Yeah, sure. Why not? So, well, listen, guys, thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you here. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.
You never know. We might have her back.
You never know. Here, let me steal this from you here. See you guys later.
Bye.
Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Please check us out on Facebook at Generation X Paranormal Podcast. Also check out our website, gxparanormal.com. And if you want to reach out with any stories or anything you want to reach out to us for, reach us at info@gxparanormal.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you and have a good day.